Hey, I'm Coop's dad, and this is the Coop's Advice podcast. Okay, so we are episode 17 of the Coop's Advice podcast channel. So today we have Brad Alexander, husband, father, Christian, skateboarder, survivor, documentary filmmaker, and friend.
I like that order.
Have I left anything off?
That's a good order. No, that's all accurate.
You notice I put husband first.
Yeah, my wife will appreciate that.
Oh.
Yeah.
For those in our audience that don't know, Brad approached us some time ago with the concept of doing a documentary about Cooper's life and legacy. And so
Correct.
Brad is our film producer and director and creator, and the whole life behind that adventure. And what I thought would be interesting and also memorable to document is that I think this process started over a year ago.
I would almost say it started 2 years ago in a weird way.
Yeah, so about 2 years ago. And we're in post-production now, where you're editing and getting it ready. We're closer to the launch point.
Yes.
And so
I'm sure we'll do a deeper dive on the process. And I know from the outside, some of these time frames are like, whoa, it's not going to be out for 6 months, or when we announced it, like it's not going to be out till next year. But I'm sure as we talk, we'll get into the process of making an actual feature-length film and what goes into it, and
we'll get into the
all
weeds
that fun
about
stuff.
that.
Yeah.
Man, this has been a interesting journey from all aspects.
Yeah.
From the moment we met, which was not about Cooper's story.
I was coming off of a documentary that was about a Holocaust survivor that came out of Auschwitz. And I had been working on that while I was still at a commercial production agency for like 4 years or so, but in COVID it really ramped up. And that wasn't my film, but I was directing it. I wasn't producing it. And while I was working on that, I had known that like God was putting it on my heart that it's like, the way I like exercise my faith and a lot of my friends is that we're very sincere about like our faith in God, but a lot of us have walked hard roads, and there's an authenticity that comes with that, right? And
Yes.
I had been feeling like God was putting on my heart, you have what we would consider like a faith-based film that's like very like family-friendly, PG, and everything works out in the end, and that hasn't been my life or a lot of my friends' lives. Or you have kind of like other films that I would consider like art films and everything in between, but I didn't see anything that really represented like some of like my friends' stories or my story. And I was hungry to do a film that would talk about like in the trenches, like addiction, things like that. And that's what led to my last film, The Threshing Floor. While we were trying to get that funded, I had met with all these like recovery centers and nonprofits and Christian nonprofits, and everyone was like, yeah, you got to do this. But every time money came up, it was like, hey, good luck with that. We're praying for you. And I was like, dude, like,
the money walks, it doesn't talk.
And
it talks, but it doesn't walk. Yeah.
I think that's just how it was meant to be.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I got a phone call from our mutual friend Reed.
Yeah.
And he had been sent a proof of concept I did 2 months earlier and hadn't watched it.
Did you know Reed already?
I did not.
You've never met him?
Joe Feary, our mutual friend,
which was a pastor.
Is a pastor,
Right.
and Joe's son, who passed away of a heroin overdose, was Reed's best friend.
Okay.
So he had sent it to Reed and heard nothing.
And the pastor got it from you because he was your pastor?
Because he was interviewed in the film.
Okay, got it.
So I know it's kind of a dance, but it all makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It's,
just following the chain of events.
So I had interviewed Joe, and we put out a proof of concept that kind of showed what the film was gonna be, and I was still trying to get it funded, and I was like kind of working on it out of my savings, which with my wife and kids is only gonna go so far, right?
Yeah.
So it was sent to Reed and Joe didn't tell me he sent it, and he hadn't heard back for months. And all of a sudden, I guess Reed had remembered it, watched it, and was like, "What's going on with this?" And Joe was like, "I don't think they have the money to make it." And he's like, "Give me his number." So I meet Reed. We instantly hit it off. He's like, "Send me what you have," and I send him a budget, a treatment, just everything I have on it. And then we decided to go into partnership on it. And it was like a dream come true. And then I get a call like a week later. And he's like, "Hey, I don't know how this fits in. I told you that I would never strong arm you or try and manipulate your process on the film. But I just ran into my friend and he just lost his son to fentanyl poisoning, taking a Xanax. And I don't know what to do with it. But like, I feel like you guys should meet." So I'm like, okay, like, yeah, like what's it gonna hurt? So we met for coffee, and I didn't realize how recent it was. I think when we met for coffee, we were like a month in, maybe.
It had just happened. We were at the park here where we live pretty much every day with our dogs, and I'm just there, with a bunch of people, the dogs, and Reed comes up from the beach and just gives me this big hug. And I was like, and he like, "I'm sorry, this and that," and and I'm like, "Thank you, I really appreciate it," And then he pulled me aside and he said, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about something." And so he kind of briefly mentioned, film, like maybe be a part of a film that he's a part of. He might want to interview you or something.
Yeah.
And I just said, "Sure, I'll meet for coffee." And then Reed explained to me that he has some personal, not just a friend, but also some family issues also around addiction. And so absolutely. So we go meet.
It was, and I remember meeting you, and there was a somberness, but like I instantly liked you. You had your nails painted black at the time. I was like, this is my kind of guy.
Yeah, that's when I did we had just launched the Machine Gun Kelly and Jaden were part of a, Unilacquer, which is a kind of a brand of nail polish.
That's
and
right.
Jaden had just come out with, in literally within a week of Cooper passing, Jaden came out with 2 songs. Beautiful Boy, Even in the Dark. And the nail polish company with Machine Gun Kelly and with Jaden launched a special color called Coop's Color, which was it's actually a dark purple. And I go, well, I'm going to wear it. So I remember at the launch of that nail polish in West Hollywood, they had a whole launch of it. It was amazing. Machine Gun Kelly showed up, Megan Fox showed up, Jaden showed up with his guitarist. He did a private little unplugged 2-song concert in front of everybody, which was just for the group. Yeah. And I got my nails done there. They were doing everybody's nails.
That's a story, man.
It was really cool. We have a couple of photos of it, but that was still all in the fog, the fog of agony, grief, whatever. So it's still a little. I remember us sitting at Starbucks with Reed, and Reed's kind of like he's a I put together things guy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I can tell he's putting things together, and he just feels he felt really compelled, by God that we were supposed to be together, and it's like, okay, whatever, we'll chat. And there was a particular moment there where this was part of an experience I had with, I call it with God and with Cooper, that there are things that are going to be for us to do, and doors are going to open. Right. And all of a sudden, you meet and maybe consider us doing some kind of interview for your film. Not this film, a film that you wrote, The Threshing Floor. Yeah,
and I think it's good for people to kind of hear some of this, just because I don't know if it's common knowledge.
It's not.
But I meet you, we're talking, and I feel like we just really hit it off. And it's so funny because sometimes when God puts a vision in you, you don't have all the steps. You just have like the urge or like the intuition that I'm supposed to do this.
You have the understanding that you're supposed to move forward.
Right.
You don't know how, but
Yep.
you know that you're going in the right direction. Just have faith.
Yep. And when we met, I remember Reed had said beforehand, verbatim had said, I don't know if this is meant to be in the threshing floor or if it's meant to be its own film. I just think I'm supposed to introduce you guys.
That's weird.
And then we have a great like hour and a half conversation. And at the end, I said, on one hand, it would be one of the only stories that doesn't connect to Tim, which is the central subject of the threshing floor.
Right.
But it would give a face to fentanyl. And I'm just trying to wrap my head. People who know me know I have to wrap my head around things. I'm trying to wrap my head around it. And I remember you said, very calmly, you said, if it's meant to be, you'll know. And then I go home, and a week later, I called you back and I said, I don't know why. I think I'm supposed to interview you guys. I still don't know how I'm going to put it in the film yet. And I came over and we sat at that table and I met Treva for the first time. And I really put together that this was like, at the time, 2.5 months prior he had passed. So 2.5 months after he passed, I'm in here setting up lights and cameras, and that was mind-blowing. And there was kind of a shrine in this back corner by the window.
Yeah, it was on the window.
This, and I think his ashes were there, and art that was sent, and
His ashes are there in that, around that, that's a brown box with his ashes in there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all his ashes. Well, that's the majority of his ashes.
And that day, just, there were a lot of emotions, but I feel like our connection started that day. And I started with Treva's interview, and I remember she was wrestling through things.
Yeah. I'm surprised that she agreed to do it and did it.
Right?
Only from the standpoint that I didn't think that she could do it and without just breaking down from the very beginning. Where she couldn't be able to do it. But she got it. She did it really well.
She did really well.
She found strength and voice. And I was like something's possessing her. So somebody's communicating through her.
Yeah. But there was a moment that got really emotional and she was struggling. And I remember we killed the cameras and I gave her a hug. And then Brandon and I prayed over her.
And Brandon, who was working with you, had known Coop.
Yeah,
and that was
like
a weird
when Coop
deal.
was a Grom.
It's like he was doing the surf when they were learning to surf when he was a kid. He was one of the instructors helping out with that group. And he goes, "Yeah, I know your son." I'm like, "What?"
So funny.
It's like how it all tied in.
Brandon was born in Laguna Beach Hospital. He was like Etney's team manager at one point, 32 team manager. He like somehow just knows people. But I remember that was a weird connection where we're like,
I think he knew him from the surf camp and also at Etney's skateboarding.
Yeah. And then at the end of the day when I left, I remember you said, because at the time you were worried because Treva was like definitely having a hard time. And I remember you said, I don't know what took place today, but I can already see that she's doing better and whatever happened, like, thank you. And we hugged. And I felt really bonded to you guys, like, even then.
Well, you were genuine. So that's when you say that you know that things like connect. When someone is truly genuine and I felt that you wanted to do this, you're being led by your heart. It's not like a commercial venture. It's not like, oh, this will be something that sells. You truly expressed that this is a story that needs to be said, spoken. So,
and I think this is important for people to know. I had never heard your son's name before. I had never heard of Jaden, Nessett, like Quentin, any of these people. Like, I'm 39 turning 40 like some months out. So I'm almost twice the age of most people in this film, right? So, and I'm not on TikTok. So it like, well, now I have a little TikTok, but I don't know what I'm doing with it. But for me, it wasn't like I was walking into a world that I knew anything about. And I think that was how God planned this out, because I am, as a documentarian, I am very objective, where I'm learning about the story as I'm making the film and through interviewing people. And I think that's better than if I was like a fan and I was like...
You're in it.
you know?
Somewhat, let's say somewhat skewed or jaded. You have a really clean, fresh, approach.
And I just want to understand the story so that I can communicate it accurately, not just for his fans, but for someone at a film festival who also like doesn't know Cooper's story. It's like I want it to be relatable for them too, or and we can get deeper into that. But coming in, I didn't know anything about his TikTok success or like the brand deals or his friends or how he was living. All I knew is I had met you guys and I had heard his story, all of his story, from you guys. And when I went to make The Threshing Floor, that was a film about my longtime friend, his heroin addiction, and how he's got 12 years recovery now, but he's also helped like thousands of people, and he worked in treatment for like a decade, and he's done radical things.
And he survived.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it's an incredible story.
We didn't want to shy away from that. Unfortunately, when we're talking about addiction, not everyone makes it, but the way their legacies are preserved. And Cooper, originally his story was towards the end of the film, but it felt like almost like a throwaway, like I'm throwing 2 minutes in there and, it's like maybe the fourth side story and it's too close to the end, but it felt like it had to go there. And I'm like,
you mean like our interview and The Threshing Floor?
Yeah, it wasn't doing it justice. And I sat on it for like a year, and then even the first festival showing, when we premiered it, Cooper's story was in there when we played it in the theater at Las Cruces International. And after watching it, I remember it was like, this isn't doing it justice. And I was like, hey, we hadn't seen each other in like a year. I'm like, hey, do you want to grab coffee? And we went to coffee, and I said, look, the timeline just for Cooper's story of sound bites I've extracted from the interviews is 45 minutes. And that's like just me sitting with you and Treva, all the things that I feel like are relatable and you would want in his story if you're going to tell it, was 45 minutes in one go.
Right.
And he's getting 2 minutes in this film. So what I had said is, what if we made a short film out of it and we put it out through the foundation, because his story needs to be heard. And you being you, and you're just like a really compassionate guy, you're like, well, let's like put together a budget and let's do it right. And let's talk to his friends and let's not like,
let's do it right.
You're like, you have a family, like we don't need you to try and make a short film on your own time and cram it in. Let's do it right. Let's get a budget. Let's talk to his friends. Let's see who would be okay being involved. And then it was a short film.
Yeah.
And then we start interviewing, and before long, I have 30 hours of interviews.
You planned on what? Like I don't know, maybe a dozen, 20 interviews? Like people? And then it went to like just huge.
Yeah, because when you're making a film,
the story.
You never know what's going to come out of an interview. So to turn down something because you're like, oh, it's going to be too difficult to fit into our short film is like, don't do that. Because you don't know what will come out of that conversation. And what happened is as we kept including and shooting interviews, and now I'm on location and we're telling stories, the places they happened and everything else, all of a sudden you're like, this isn't a short film. Like,
no. This
is a feature-length film.
I remember
to tell
when you
it.
Came back and said, to really do this right, we have to go, longer. And
yeah.
It needs to be in this category. And it was like, okay, so do it. Like, what's the problem? It's going to get done. I remember I just said it's going to get done because this is not in our hands or your hands. It just keeps going, and it's getting really good. But the money keeps getting provided. Yeah. The people really cool. participate. The story develops. And we're not even there yet. You just wait till we're there.
You guys haven't seen what's actually laid down of the film, but for me, it's like, filmmaking's a process. So you don't just lay down a sequence. You lay down a sequence, and then you have to watch how that flows. So a lot of times you're watching through. If you have half an hour that you feel like is really good, you're watching through that half hour like over and over and over and fine-tuning and tweaking and oh, now 10 minutes in, I realize the sequence maybe should go later. We're introducing that concept too soon. You move it, you put it together, watch it through again. So it's like, I've been watching these interviews for like the last 7-8 months over and over and laying sequences. So it's like,
no,
I'm just waiting until everyone gets to see.
I've learned through communicating with you, I got to see your process. I got to see part of your process towards the end of the threshing floor, where you re-edited some endings and things of that sort.
Yeah.
And I liken it to what my experience has been in music in a studio, where the producer will hear it, and they go, let's change this track, or let's bring this in, or let's try this down, and it evolves. It's an evolution. It's like a birth. It starts off as a moment of life, and it ends up like this little tadpole to finally this baby that's inside all squished up, and then it comes out, and then it ends up like an adult. It's
and
really
so
an evolution.
Like when you hear certain people, like well-known producers or music and film, if you hear Tarantino like speak about a film, it's like very similar. Is so much of it is intuition. This doesn't feel quite right. I don't know why yet. So you got to keep tweaking and watching, because you're like, it doesn't feel like it's there yet.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's feel, but so to step back, here's the thing with Cooper. I've learned when you're doing the type of documentaries I do, it comes at a cost.
Yeah.
So for me, I always have to know that as a director, I can bring something to this film. My main goal is not for my voice to be heard, it's to elevate voices I think matter. But there is going to be a flair on it that comes from me being a director. There's certain things I do or whatever, and developing your style.
I'm saying you're going to have your style associated with it.
So I have to make sure
your vision of the story to be told. Your version of telling the story.
And I really learned on that Live to Tell film, even though there's, I always put a smidge of hope on things, right? So in that story, him coming out of Auschwitz, he spent 5 or 6 decades collecting artifacts from Auschwitz and making them into art. And then he had an exhibit over yonder in Huntington Beach that he brought schools through. And there was like Stars of David made out of barbed wire from the Auschwitz fence. And like, it was like really impactful.
Yeah.
But when you have to listen to someone's story that's that tragic over and over again, it comes at a cost. And not even just the story, the survivor's guilt of like his mom and sisters being executed day one and him feeling like he abandoned his mom. His brother and his dad dying in the camp.
Why not me?
All of that. Yeah, why not me? And you're immersed in that for months and months and months. It took me a while to recover from that. So now I know if the juice is worth the squeeze, you do it anyway, because it's a story that needs to be told, but it will come at a cost to you. You will get depressed for a bit, or I'm an empath, so it's like you're going to have some down days. You're going to have moments that you feel very emotional, etc. But if I can connect with it and I feel like I bring something valuable as a director and it's something that I feel like the world needs to know about, then it's worth doing. And the other thing is, can I relate to it? So take Cooper. There's areas we're different, but I'm a lifelong skateboarder. I had my own bout with prescription medications. And for me, in the same way, I'm an empath. So I relate with Cooper from the stories I've heard, where I think I had my first like suicidal ideations when I was 10 or 11 years old. And, my environment was always like, I was in between houses. My parents split when I was a baby. And then my dad had another divorce when I was 9. So I was always in between and people were in and out of my life.
Yeah.
So that could have played a role, but I think I'm sensitive anyway. And you realize a lot of people, some of my like best friends that are some of the best people I know, have had addictions or even done time. Why is that? Because when you're sensitive, a lot of times you have to find ways to mitigate that if it becomes hard. And some people self-sedate, which was me. Yeah. Some people it's anger, and all of a sudden it's like the world's not going to take advantage of me, and then they end up doing a prison sentence or something. But for me, I self-sedated. And when I was 19 on New Year's, I was taking muscle relaxers like Somas, and I was drinking, and I remember like my vision started to go out on me. It was almost like if you had eyes behind your eyes and they moved back. Where it's like I was looking out and everything seemed distant, and my arms and my legs felt weird, and all of a sudden everything would go black and I'd trip and I'd be crawling around on the ground, and then my vision would come back, but it was distorted. And I remember feeling like, oh, this is what dying feels like. And I went and I laid in my bed, and it was New Year's, so friends kept coming and they're like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm gonna die tonight, and I'm kind of just waiting for the transition. And they're like, no, quit talking like that. And then I survived, and there was a lot of phone calls the next day. And you would think that would have woken me up, but it didn't. So then some years later, I'm living in a party house where, you know, all we do is kind of party, and I was working at a hair salon, so, you know, I could do like a 4-day binge of going into the salon and doing uppers, and no one's going to call me out because a lot of people are doing that kind of stuff.
Right.
Well, then all of a sudden it's like at 6 a.m. with my roommate, I had the closest thing I've ever felt to a heart attack at 22 years old, you know?
Wow.
We're like, I did a bump, and all of a sudden my head hits the back of the ground. I'm staring at the ceiling. I'm sweating bullets. My heart's beating out of my chest. And again, I was like, I think I'm about to die. And he's like, no, you're good. And I'm like, no, can you take me to the hospital? And he's like, no, you're good. And I'm like,
wow,
I'm not good. Can you take me somewhere? And he's like, you just need to eat. And he's trying to get me to eat toast. I can't even chew it because I'm, you know, I'm on a 4-day bender. You can't eat food.
Oh, jeez.
And then, just to wrap up this tangent, a few months later, I was taking Percocet and morphine, and I was going back and forth. And after a couple
to calm
days,
down, you get high, then calm down, like up, and
I just couldn't do life sober because I was so like always debating the meaning of life, always troubled by things, always felt sad.
yeah.
So Percocet had become my drug of choice, but the dealer who would come by the house, you know, was like, hey, I have morphine, you should buy that too. And then one was every 6 hours, one was every 4, so I'm like cycling back and forth, and all of a sudden 2 days goes by and I forget when I took what. And I have a point to all this. But then I went out to Hoagie Bar Michael's, which was a venue we all used to go to, and no one knew that I was doing what I was doing. So friends were like, hey, like, they had a pitcher and they poured me a beer, and I was like, I can't drink tonight. My friend's like, yeah, you can. And like, he didn't know, but he's just like, you're 22, so it's like everything is like, nah, we're raging tonight. And then I'm
but you already
drinking.
had drugs in your system with alcohol?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's not good.
So we get back to the house, and I remember my friend Harvey didn't know, but he wanted to go buy a pack of smokes, and we drive down Niguel and Laguna Niguel to the liquor store, and I feel like I'm floating on a cloud as he's driving. Like my body was so numb. And then we get cigarettes, and I'm smoking a cigarette, and I can't feel the smoke going in my lungs. I just see it coming out. And I was like, dude, I'm in really bad shape right now. So I get back to the house. There's a party going on, and I'm like, hey, I just need to go to bed. And I go and I pass out. And I don't know when I woke up, but I woke up in the middle of the night. And I think the morphine must have been time release, and I ran to the bathroom and I threw up, and before I passed back out, I remember I could see pills in the toilet. And then I wake up the next day and I realize, like, if those had digested in my system, I think I would have died last night.
You threw up the pills.
I threw up. There were still
undigested
pills in my stomach.
Jeez.
And it was like,
yeah,
so
you would have died in your sleep.
Here's the point of all this.
Yeah.
About a year after that, I was encountered with what I knew without a doubt it was the presence of God. And I was a skeptic. I was not looking for religion. I thought life is about making the best of a bad situation, make yourself happy, do whatever, it sucks anyway. And all of a sudden I'm confronted by something, and I was like, oh my God, this is all true. And at the same time, oh my God, I can't be a Christian. Like, what will my friends think? Like, I wouldn't fit in with those people, but it was like I had gone too far. I know too much to not believe that there's a God.
Yeah.
So that was 16 years ago. I stopped doing drugs like right away. I've had other things I have to work through, but like all of a sudden that was kind of taken away. My depression wasn't taken away, but that was. And when I hear a story like Cooper's, For me, I'm like, if fentanyl was a thing back then, I was almost dying without fentanyl.
You'd been dead.
So what happens if there's fentanyl? I'd be dead.
You'd be dead.
So what fentanyl took away is Cooper's ability to stabilize in the same way that I got to stabilize, and that doesn't feel fair.
You got a chance.
Yep.
He didn't get a chance.
So
that's what's sad about
that's what
this whole
resonates
thing.
with Cooper.
Yeah, because all these people, these kids, didn't need to die and don't need to continue to die.
Yeah.
We're going to look back, and the things that I see that are consistent we're starting to see it now. It's associated with COVID, people being home, out of work. What do they call that? Not the stay in place. When you're at home in place.
I know a lot of
Shelter
people that
in place.
relapsed.
And everybody's doing everything online. Just very disruptive. And it was also the beginning of the boom of the TikTok generation, the influencers. They boomed for that because, they're home. It just blew up. They have the time. They're not at school, getting their stuff done, whatever they're doing. And Cooper was part of that. But part of that also came fentanyl.
Yeah.
And so, and fentanyl came, I think, because of two reasons. One, the U.S. started clamping down on the opioid crisis and making everybody aware, and the accountability and going after pharma, Sackler family, things of that sort. There's a lot of things they put in place. The national pharmacy drug system, where everything was now being counted and measured, so you just couldn't go from pharmacy to pharmacy to pharmacy. Your prescriptions are now nationwide. We know that
Which is how people used to doctor shop.
Yeah.
Is if one pharmacy turned you down, you could go down the street and get it filled.
So now you can't do that because it's a nationwide system. And so fentanyl came in to supply that demand of the addiction. And we have this whole generation from basically 2000 and that blew up, early 2020 going forward, in a lot of good, positive ways, and a lot of really, sad and dangerous ways. Like, you'd have been dead. Cooper,
for sure.
You had the opportunity to get a second chance, and you're here.
Yeah.
I really believe that he would be here today if it wasn't for that moment.
Yep.
Because just of the things we talked about, where he was at, what he was doing. When he passed that day, and this is probably part looking back, and I'm saying this more and more now because it really is a big change in the road of my direction, and that change was, if I knew then what I know now, I would have done things differently, but I didn't know. I didn't know that the two drugs that are the drugs that you cannot detox from personally on your own without medical supervision, because you have a very high risk of dying. One is alcohol. You can't detox on your own. If you need medical supervision to prevent you from dying. And the other one is the benzodiazepines, which are benzos, Xanax, Klonopin. They're the antidepressants. And people would think, the general public thinks, it's like heroin and barbiturates and all the synthetic opioids like
You'll be real
Oxycontin
sick
and all
for
that.
sure, but you won't die.
You won't die. You'll get sick.
Yeah.
I mean, you could possibly die. Things that could happen, like you could be asleep on your back, you could vomit, you could suffocate, but you're not going to. Your heart's not going to stop unless, for some reason, you're like super like maybe there's some people that can take 50, 60 Percocets a day or Oxys a day. I mean, that's super addicted. Yeah, that's someone. But when someone is doing maybe a dozen a day or something, but you don't have to take that much Xanax. But the issue is it'll cause your heart to stop. So you're fighting a struggle that you don't know that you need medical help. So Cooper had gone through, as you know, a bad, kind of a lonely struggle. His best friend was traveling. His girlfriend had just moved out, and these are things that weren't causes of him to do this. These are things that
it's just
it's
a
in
concoction,
how he was processing things. Like, what are the things that he didn't like? He didn't like to be alone. If he was alone, he'd call somebody up, like, let's go play Call of Duty. Let's go skateboard. We could be alone, but it's like, and I'm kind of the same way. I don't want to be alone for an extended period of time. I'd rather be doing something else.
Yeah.
He was on his way to a Bible study.
Yes.
And he had not done anything for a few days. And this struggle with Xanax is you can't do it on your own. You just can't.
Right.
So
I'm glad you brought this up.
He
though.
stops and gets recommended to someone. He said that someone that he trusted.
Yeah.
That said you could trust this person, and the struggle ends up being so great, and you think like, okay, I'm just gonna get one, and it'll help me get through, and I can taper off. I guess that's what I'm trying to articulate. You cannot taper off on your own with the antidepressants, but you can with the opioids. You can with heroin. I'm not saying it's easy, but you're not going to die from it.
Right.
So he goes and trusts this guy.
Yeah.
And, he goes into, takes an Uber on his way. I've talked to him in the Uber on where he was going. And he stops at this mall. He goes in and meets the guy. He gets it. He took it somewhere between getting it from the guy in the mall to walking out into the parking lot of the mall. You have a mall, and then there's the adjacent covered, structure. The parking structure, and he dies there. And so, and when we get the talk screen finally from issued from the coroner, there's evidence of residual antidepressants in the system.
Yeah.
But there's no antidepressant in the system. There's no opioids. There's nothing. It's just fentanyl. He got a fake pill that was all fentanyl from somebody he trusted, recommended by somebody he trusted, and he died. And he didn't have to die.
There's a few things
he was struggling. He was really being faithful to God. He had been talking to his friends. He had set up the Discord about that and talked to people. You see all the things, the interviews you've probably had where he was talking with God and praying for people. You have the thing where he's with Jaden, and Jaden's about to go on stage, and they're backstage. Hey, let's pray. He brings the group together. Fuck.
Yeah. I'm sorry, dude. It's one of the things that
pisses me off. And when I sit across and look at these motherfuckers in court, that don't give a shit that they've killed somebody. There's no remorse. There's no acknowledgement. In fact, they're smirking, and there is...
that's what Parker told me too.
There's like smirking. I don't know how else to explain it. Like laughing at you. Like,
It's very demonic in its own way.
Such a self-serving, narcissistic... It's satanic in my view. It's diabolical. Agree. And so that's why I'm just so hell-bent that some other kid's not going to go through. They're going to get a chance.
Yeah.
And whatever we do. Like this film, the message is that we want kids to get another chance, make a decision, make a choice. You can make other choices.
Yeah.
Empower these people, kids, adults, that not because we told you, you take it and be empowered and you make the decision because you can. And then just get through it. You can continue and have a lot. Look at your life. Look at, what's your friend's name in the threshing floor? Tim. I remember when we chatted and you showed me the bit of the film where they're on the way to rehab. And in Vegas, they go, we're just going to do one last time before we go. And what happens?
He almost dies.
How?
He nods off in the car, and I think
he and his girlfriend
overdosed and died. She nods off, crashes the car on the freeway. The cops get called, and when they show up, they revived him.
Did she die?
No. No, she was less high than him, but they weren't used to Vegas heroin. It was potent. If she didn't crash the car, this is an intervention of God. If she doesn't crash the car, Tim's dead right now. She thought he was sleeping in the seat.
Oh, he would have OD'd in the seat.
Yeah.
Wow, that's powerful.
Man, I always just love your like vulnerability and just like ability to just pour it out. But there's so much to unpack in like some of the stuff you just said. And I want people to not miss this. Because, when neighbors, my kids are playing outside and they ask me about the film and you bring up, he was on his way to a Bible study. They're like, why was he taking a Xanax? Yeah. Tim was the first person to say this to me. Tim was like, okay, first of all, Cooper took half a pill. And it was not cut with fentanyl, it was fentanyl.
It was fentanyl.
Fentanyl and fillers. It's pressed to look like a Xanax. It is not a Xanax cut with fentanyl, it is just fentanyl. Bill Bodner made that very clear when we talked.
Yeah.
Tim was like, he's been struggling. He's been on it a lot. Him taking half a pill before a Bible study, that's to acclimate so you're not shaky and withdrawing. That's just like, that's not you getting high. That's you like, just so I can be normal right now, I just need half a pill so that my body will stop withdrawing. So when people take it like maybe he was just trying to like get high and then go to this, but no. Yeah. He's withdrawing. He just needs half a pill to stabilize. Is what
it's
what we're really looking
what
at
you
here.
Hear to some degree, where you hear people that they've gone to a party or a dinner and they drank too much wine.
Yeah.
And the next day the hair of the dog. Like have a beer in the morning and your hangover won't be that bad. And and it does kind of work because you just put a little bit more alcohol in your system. And then it allows you to just kind of taper off and have a smoother day of a hangover.
And Xanax is highly physically dependent.
But that's different, right, in the benzoscene.
Yeah.
It has an effect where your heart can stop.
It's insane. And then the other thing, and I'm not trying to like throw defamation, but from what I know, the people who are going to stand trial for Cooper's death were living a very luxurious lifestyle. The cars they were driving are cars that I'll probably never see the inside of. To get to that level, you have to be pushing some real product, which we know they were.
It was a business.
I guess allegedly. Let's just pretend for a second that only the stash that Cooper got pills off and died from fentanyl poisoning of, we'll pretend for a second that's the only stash that was contaminated with fentanyl. Very unlikely. Bill said 7 out of 10 pills coming off the street are just fentanyl. So even though we'll say 70% is what you're looking at, we'll pretend it was just one stash. The amount of product you're ordering in, even if it was one stash of pills, Cooper is not the only person that died off that stash. I guarantee it. So what you guys are really doing, yes, this is about Cooper. It's also every other kid or human being out there that doesn't have a voice that also probably died off taking pills from that stash.
Yeah.
And even if that was the only one, but chances are it wasn't. They probably were killing people for a year and a half after Cooper died with no remorse.
Well, when one of them was arrested, almost a year later.
Yeah.
They did raids that morning, it was like 4 or 5 in the morning, typically what they do. This guy was coming home from a party, high, with, the shopping bag, the dealer bag, with various drugs, digital scale, all that stuff, because he goes to the parties, he gets high, and he sells his stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
no remorse.
It's insane we're talking about that.
The person directly responsible for Cooper's death that Cooper met with, less than a month later, he is in Europe partying with his friends.
Yeah.
All over Europe. And he's documented that on his social media, and you can see it, like, here I am, this and that, blah, 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 blah. And if there was any true remorse, I would think there would at least be some fear that I could get caught. So maybe I should, like, that's the logical brain of me thinking. But when you know that you're responsible for someone's death, okay, and then within 2-3 weeks later, you're traveling on an expensive vacation, partying and getting high around the world, it's like, that doesn't really show anything but complete narcissism.
Yeah. Absolutely. So,
I mean, you're right. We just don't want anybody else to go through this. And that was the premise and the goal of the film.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, this film is not just Cooper's time in LA, because that was just the last 2 years of his life. This film is, I try and balance things in the films I do. So it's like, you want a balance of like backstory and present day, and you want an educational piece, and it can't be too much in any one area. But what we're doing is we're talking about, there's one storyline that's talking about the aftermath of losing Cooper, the foundation, what you guys are trying to do to be a voice in that space, to put people through treatment, to raise awareness, which is already kind of like BS that as a country, we know this is this huge epidemic, and we're putting all the burden on families who have lost people to it to be a voice for it. Yeah. But you guys are a voice in the space. So that's a storyline. Cooper's life is a storyline, but not just LA. I mean, we're talking about growing up in Laguna Beach. We're talking about the things he cared about, what he was into, what he was like as a person, how he was with his Laguna Beach friends.
I think you've done a really good job with that I've seen so far. Just on the, like in the first trailer, interviewing his childhood friends and his that he grew up with, that knew him before he, went to LA. Which it seems like it was a break and went to there, like a second, like part 2 of a life.
Yeah.
But you do a very good job and they do a very good job of being candid and open and emotional.
Yeah.
Especially the boys.
I don't know that anyone's made it through their interview without crying besides like Bill Bodner, and that's because we were talking about fentanyl. He's not one of Cooper's friends, but and even Wilderness, the good and some of the setbacks that came with this time in boarding school, because as we've talked about, there was good elements too.
Yeah.
He needed to stabilize.
Yeah.
He needed to be taken out of his environment to stabilize, is what most people have conceded, is like, if he had stayed, who knows?
Right.
But while he was at boarding school, it's like things happen, but also he learned, and I've heard him say this on podcasts he was on, he learned how to be really in touch with his emotions and be like emotionally aware and like self-aware, and you guys learned how to do open communication that may not have happened if he didn't go.
He taught us to be real. That was his term.
Yeah.
Like when he needed to really talk about something, he would say, "Dad, I need to be real. I need to get real with you for a moment." So I meant like, this is serious and I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
He has to say something, and it would be, and I would use that term with him as well. Hey, Coop, let me know, you got a minute, I need to get real with you about something. And there were things that I would just ask him an opinion about that had nothing to do with him. It was things that I was going through. He really brought those coping skills, because when we went to visit him in boarding school, where we had these family therapy sessions, and they were typically within a group of other families, we were all in. I mean, Trina and I were all in, because we understood it meant saving his life. And like really getting these skills to deal with things that he had shared that really hurt him inside. Experiences that he went through as a child, at school, being bullied for being, taking after his dad and being shorter and slighter, being Hispanic, being, treated with racial prejudice, people being jealous of him for a number of things, because he was a gifted athlete, because he was smart, because he was a good-looking kid. The stuff that kids are always, doing that, but some are more sensitive than others and struggle with it.
I heard he was a natural leader too.
Yeah, and other kids can be mean, just
Yeah.
nasty. Yeah, he was a natural leader. He was also the one to be able to. Maybe you've seen this through some of the interviews, but through the LA scene, all the things that involve the dynamics of different people, different personalities, different sexes, the girls, the boys, etc., different orientations, preferences and all that.
Yeah.
He was able to, like, when there was drama, he was like Switzerland. He would able to get people to able to, like, put their shit aside and still, like, to be friends, and he would still be friends with them. They might have a riff, but he wasn't going to take a side. He would still be Switzerland. Like, I'm still your friend. Sorry it didn't work out with her. I'm friends with her, vice versa, or this group. He never really took an offensive or dug his heels in. And if you look at what he did, this was a really interesting dynamic. Parker's 5 years older.
Mm-hmm.
She's a very, very headstrong person. Cooper can be the same way, but he's different. He's more of, I can get you to do what I want you to do. Parker's like, fuck you guys, I'm doing this and I'm out of here. And I'm going to go do it anyway. So, they're just different.
I've gathered
So,
that.
like, when he was telling me that he's living with her, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
You guys are living together in LA? I go, this is when we picked Sab up.
And then she moved in.
And like,
right?
he goes, I can pick up a friend. They're going to stay with me for a couple of weeks. I'm like, yeah, sure. And like, beware. And, because he was staying up at Quentin's and he was staying at the house, the Sway house.
Yeah.
So he goes, well, no, I'm moving in with Parker. I'm like, wait, does your mother know about this? He goes, yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, I am out of this one. Because I just thought it would be, oil and water, It
went really well though, right?
So he shows up with Sab. I go, does she know Sab's coming to stay with you? Let alone you're living with her? I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be like just hell. And so, no, Parker immediately loves Sab. Says, oh, it's cool. I love her. She's great. She's fine. He goes, no, Coop and I are actually fine together. He might keep his room dirty, but whatever. But no, he's responsible. And he brought Parker's friend group of 5 years older and his friends group 5 years younger together where they all started hanging out. He was able to, for some reason, just make that happen. He was a facilitator. And Parker's career started taking off because of his friends. It's one of the components.
That's cool.
She started doing work for that group and getting connected. And it was like, to me, I would have never, ever bet that would have happened. I would have bet money all day long that this was going to be nothing but a problem. But it ended up being like really some of the best times of their life where Parker and Cooper became so close after that. They were close,
cool.
but they were really close.
Yeah.
I think it's part of the maturity, but it's also Treva's really strong sense of family that she has always just shown that this is how our family has to be. And that's how she grew up. Very close with her family, that we're all going to be very close. I didn't have that. I relied on, my family dynamic wasn't that way. I was all in that she did that and supported it, and she got those kids to be family first.
I could see that.
You saw in the beginning of the trailer where she reads the note about Cooper when he was born. Always stay close to your sister and blah, blah, blah. So it was tough. But he had a gift.
Yeah.
He had a real gift for that.
The second we recorded that, I knew that was going to be like towards the beginning of the film. And then it is towards the beginning of the film. It's like 2 minutes in or something. But when I was making that teaser, I was just like, there's something about the vulnerability and emotions of a mom having to grieve the outcome that you've heard me say this a lot from our meeting with like way back. We had the meeting with Jaden, and I said it too. Is there's this old saying where it's like 1,000,000 deaths is a number, but one death is a tragedy. And when people hear like 100,000 a year like die from fentanyl, I think they can't really make that concrete. It's like, oh, that's a lot of people, that's gnarly, whatever, but you micro focus in, here's one death from fentanyl, and look how much this has affected his family, his friends, even the people that just knew him through his online presence.
Yeah, the fan world, the fan base of hundreds of thousands or millions.
Yeah, so if you want people to care, it's like, then I need to show you why you should care. And I'm going to show you in the same way that I started caring, is by hearing about this kid's life and how it's affected people.
Yeah.
And if that can't get through to you, then I don't know like what would, but I think it will.
Well, it seems to, on its own so far, with the things that Coop started and left for us to do, like, the relationship with End Overdose, the relationship with the Discord channel. I made a commitment a few months ago. Prior to that, there was a moderator that Cooper had met online that helped him, one of the moderators that's helped him set up the Discord channel, who stayed there the whole time, who's offered their services to maintain the channel. She's out of Canada. She's a wonderful girl named Riley. She's never asked for anything.
Wow.
And so we put her on a payroll through the foundation, because they're like, you have to get paid
really
for this.
Cool.
Well, I mean, she supports it, she moderates it, she comes up with ideas. Like, we do a 12 Days of Christmas thing, we do giveaways, we do a lot of promos, we'll do some live features on it. But I made a commitment a few months ago to go on every day with whatever message, whatever it is, but to be present and to be active on it, because I wasn't, and it ends up going to fade away. It's a couple 100,000 kids around the world, kids and adults. I heard somebody this morning I read talking about their children, and so I knew they had to be older. And I get the engagement from it, and it's important, and they're always there to offer love, hope, and encouragement every time. I don't know of one person yet. I have not heard in any social media contact to me by DM or anything else, or through Discord, where we've lost anybody. I've seen the suicide, I've seen the drug addiction, the self-harm. I've seen a lot of things.
Yeah.
But and people saying that they're gonna, this is it, and we've not yet. They've made choices to do something else. So I don't want to jinx it. I want to keep that way. And but he started those. He started that platform for that reason, and it still works.
This stuff is important, man. And when we did a screening of The Threshing Floor in Long Beach at the Art, and we sold it out, and we kind of did it as like an experience, and I hope we're going to do this with Tell Me About Tomorrow as well, is after we did a full 1 hour Q&A, but instead of having me just talk about the film, I did go up and talk about the film and do thank yous, but then we did a panel. And we're like, we're just going to humanize, and we're going to chop up the relationship of trauma and addiction, recovery, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, ask questions.
And we had someone on the panel who had done, I think, 20 years for a stabbing when he was 13. And his story's far more relatable than general society would like to believe these stories are. But he works in treatment now, and he really cares about people. And it was just like, his whole story's emotional and how he came to God. But he said something that just stuck out to me. And he said, before, he started crying about someone that was close to him that he just lost. And he said, before, someone could leave treatment and they could run this thing out another 1.5 years and come back. And he said, now they leave and a week later they're dead. That's what fentanyl has done.
Yeah.
So whereas before, your addiction, maybe you could have run a marathon. Now it might be a 10K, a 5K, it might be a mile. It might be your first steps off the starting line. Like, you don't have this giant, I'm going to be addicted for 10 years and figure it out. You may go to a party and the first time you try something and that's the end. And that's what, I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and it's like, this is going to be the reality is my kids are sensitive because my wife and I are sensitive. And that's going to be something that I'm looking out and I'm like, okay, we're going to have to navigate this too. But why I want to elevate your guys' voice is not just because Cooper's story is important, but Cooper's story is still reaching people, and what you guys are doing is still reaching people. But still, there's a lot of people out there that just don't get it yet. And it's like, we need you to get it because everyone is valuable.
You mentioned about that disconnect and getting it. We recently just filmed a podcast with the new head of the LADEA that took over Bill Bodner's spot. And one of the things that we spoke about, or that he spoke about, the average yearly deaths attributed to fentanyl, and they call it overdose, but we're trying to get it changed to be poisoning, because nobody's really taking fentanyl purposely.
Right.
There are some, but the vast majority are, illicit drugs, they're counterfeit, thinking you're getting something else, and it's fentanyl.
Yeah.
That's been on an average over 100,000 a year, from 103 to 107,000 deaths a year. Matthew said that is down now about 14%.
Okay.
And so here's the big disconnect, though, as we were talking earlier. And the disconnect is that's still 70, 80,000 people. So the public hears it's 14% down. And I think people go, great, we're in the right direction. Let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And then we forget about it. But it's still too many people.
Yeah.
The Jelly Roll performer, made a great comparison when he was in front of Congress, saying it's like having a 737, crashing, every day in the United States. And if we had like a wheel fall off or a door fly open, all those planes would be grounded. But we're having, maybe it's 80, maybe it's, whatever, 1,000, 100,000 a year dying. Nothing's happening. We need a COVID-like response. But, and look what that did from an emergency standpoint. This is beyond an epidemic and an emergency. And my fear is that we're losing awareness about it or interest in it. When I asked Matt, what do you think is it causing, attributing to the reduction? And I was actually surprised that what he said was a couple things. One, the use of naloxone. More people are being saved that would have died because naloxone education, like through End Overdose, a lot of these other platforms, people are carrying it. They're educated in using it. They have it. They're administering it at parties or concerts and what have you. And the other part is that through the grassroots organizations like our foundation, the awareness and education is having an effect on people. They're making decisions and not to do certain things out of the fear that they might die from fentanyl. But it's still, 70, 80 plus thousand people a year dying. It's too much. One is too much, Brad.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I kind of was talking about it earlier, but let's just say I died at 22 or even 19 at the first time something happened. And that's the end of my story. It's like when you look at, I've been with my wife 14 years, married for 10. We have 2 kids, 8 and 5. I'm making films for a living. I'm trying to do, God has allowed me to do some really cool things. And it's like, well, Cooper shined way brighter than I did in his 19, 20 years. And it's like, where would he be at 39? What kind of things would he have done in his life? And that was taken away by the fentanyl situation. And, my friend Joe, who has twin daughters and a son, and his daughter was murdered. And his son died after a relapse on heroin that was cut with fentanyl. Wow. And that was in 2013, so that's when they were still cutting it. Heroin's probably harder to hide because it's like a brown powder, so they probably just cut it in there. But he always reminds me, behind every one of those deaths is a family that's grieving that person. And, you know, his daughter died in 2018. Yeah, 2018, his son in 2013. And he's like, a little piece is gone after that. He's like, I'll always walk with the limp. So his friends go on and get married and have kids and do all these things, and we're happy for them. But there's always a reminder of what Gabe didn't get in life, or where Sarah would be in every holiday we remember, and the kids' birthdays. She had 3 boys that they're now raising. There's all these reminders, and they'll carry that the rest of their life. So when you think about 100,000 a year, even in 2020, there people that had happened in 2020, well, they're still grieving it now. You know, so every year, whether it's 80,000, 70,000, so hypothetically 70,000 families just entered into what'll be the rest of their life grieving this person they lost.
Yeah.
And when you put it in those terms, for me, it's like, are we not fired up to make noise about this? Are we not fired up to put pressure on politicians to do something about fentanyl coming in this country? Or how we, for instance, you could really educate, you probably talked about this on the last podcast, but prosecuting people who are dealing fentanyl that's leading to deaths even is not that easy, at least in California. No. Are we ready to make enough noise to start changing these things? And that's why I think we're making the film and the podcast and all these things, is like, hey, like, do we understand the weight of this? And I love, not love, but I it's so impactful that you told me at that last bail hearing, you had to remind everyone, hey, I know we're all talking about laws and different things, but I'm here to remind you, my son died. You know? And it's like, are we forgetting that?
The human element, because they argue points of law back and forth in this triangle between judge and defense and prosecuting attorney. Yeah. And I have no disrespect for that, but it's also, it gets diluted. They're arguing over legal facts, really about this is a particular bail hearing, but hey, don't forget the fact, I'm here as a representative of my son who died because of these actions. So the human element is here. Yeah. Like, you can see it with me in my pain, up at the podium talking, reminding you that was my son, okay, 19, he's dead because of this. I'm here because of that. Didn't plan on being here. Yeah. But so it brings an eerie silence, and it brings a jolt of everybody back to reality, and it helps the prosecution, in my opinion, because, you know, the dilution, you know, works against, you know, I think justice, in my opinion. You know, it's just another case. It's not just another case. Each one of these are each and of its own. It's a life, you know. Yeah. And so I think we do get, it's our human nature. I think we get distracted. I think there's a new disaster of the day that happens, new talking points, new news, but we can't forget, because there's no degree of separation from people that know anyone. Everyone's directly affected by fentanyl poisoning. Yeah. And we have to stop the demand on one end, the demand for it. And I think 2 ways of doing that is the education about what's out there and how dangerous it is. And really the underlying core of this is mental health. The why you choose to do something, to maybe numb yourself or get high, why you're making that choice, even if you know that the landscape is, the odds are against you, when 70% out there is going to kill you, 7 out of 10. And then there's the source. And I'm a big fan of go in to where the source is and take it out. Yeah. You know, it's death. Take it out. If you got to cross the border, I mean, this is like terrorism. We went to Afghanistan, okay? We went all over to root out this evil. Whether it's here or it's there, you know, we have military forces, teams train for this, and we implement death penalty here for people that are stronger penalties. They are deterrents. People talk about, we're costing too much money and flooding the prison and jail systems, with prosecuting these people.
Yeah.
No, at this level, no, death sentence and carry it out quickly. We don't need 20 years of appeals and this and that. This should be a one and done. It sends the message and work with the demand. It's going to stop. Now, can we achieve that? So this is a long battle.
Yeah.
What we're doing, with Cooper's story and your documentary is one step to help with the awareness and the education and the empowerment of people that they can control their own lives and get away from something that's controlling their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the same things that drove me into an addiction, they're still in there. There's one major thing that changed, but it's like I wanted to get out of my head, right? There's too much going on in here. I just want to turn the faucet off. Painkillers are really good for that.
Yeah.
Sure, Xanax is really good for that. Xanax was never my thing, but it's all, relative.
Right.
Now, because things upset me, I express myself to get that out instead of sedating myself. That's why I make films. Is I want to get that expression out. I want people to know these things that trouble me. I want to elevate people's voice. The same thing that was a liability. My friend Tim says this, your addiction can be a liability or an asset. My obsessive nature is still kind of there. That same part in me that caused me to take a pill every 4 hours until the bottle's gone. It's still there, but now I obsess about like doing films or things that are positive.
Things. Yeah, positive things.
Right now I've been trying to reclaim my health and work out, and I kind of get obsessed about it.
It's a healthy obsession.
Yeah.
Yeah, it all begins with a healthy choice.
The only thing that changed for me that allowed me to shift the liability to an asset is that when I was almost dying taking drugs, my life didn't have value to me. So even though it would get scary if I almost died, when I would wake up, it's like, well, if I had died, maybe it'd do me a favor. I don't have the courage to go through with it, but maybe it'd be okay and, whatever. And I don't believe that to be the case, but what shifted when I gave my life to God is God reset my compass and said, you do have value. You are loved. There's a plan for your life. There's things that you're going to do in your life. And now that my life has value, it's like I find purpose in channeling those same things into healthy things, because it's like, man, I want to help people. I want to be compassionate to people. I want to show love to people. I want to change the status quo, not in a weird way where it's like, believe what I believe, but more in a way of like, man, I want to see people set free from the bondage of addiction, because addiction sucks. Like all of Cooper's friends have told me how much he hated his addiction. He wasn't just partying. He wasn't like, oh, sometimes I have a little slip up, but it's okay. It was like, it's not a part. He was always warring against it. And I want to join that cause of like, this isn't about like drugs are bad, let me shake a stick at you. This is about like, man, I don't want anyone to have to take drugs every day, because I remember how much it sucks.
And to drill down a little bit is that I know that there were certain things like how Xanax can get a hold of certain people and become, or you can become dependent on it. But Coop's struggle was the struggles that he had inside from a mental health standpoint, meaning he struggled with certain things that he viewed about the world and how he viewed about himself. And at times, those can be too great, seem to be insurmountable for you. So, which has led some people, as far as coping mechanisms, to take something, to do that choice versus a different choice. And that was the path he was on, was that I'm working to grab onto this empowerment and make it a new habit, these positive things that I'm doing, versus going back to old habits and the old tapes that are there. I mean, I don't think they ever go away. I think, like, I've noticed behavioral changes that I've made in my life, but those tapes are still kind of a knee-jerk, first gut react, like a visceral reaction when there's a trauma. But I've learned that that does not work, and I can stop, take an accounting, and go, I know I need to do this because I know this is not good for me or good for people around me. And so I think that's where he was headed. And like, if you just had that one more day, you never know how things would have turned out. I believe he was making real progress with things, and yet, who knows?
No, this is one of the things that I'm really excited for people to see in the film, because, you know, there was some stuff going on the last couple months of Cooper's life. And I think there's the narrative that people think they know based on what was being put out in public and different things.
What they see on social media.
Yes. And then there's things I've seen, like text messages that were sent literally within days of what happened, and conversations that were happening. And when you start to interview people and get a way better depiction, and when you don't offer up information, but people are corroborating the same set of events, then it's safe to say there's truth here, because 3 different people told me something. And one of the things I'm really excited for people to see is I feel like it's a really good chance to show people Cooper's life and also the events leading up to kind of what happened and what was really going on, as far as we can tell, behind the scenes with different interactions. And I think one thing that was eye-opening for me is Hunter was telling me they were having a conversation where, you know, he met up with Cooper and he looked like he was in pretty bad shape. And he's basically said, like, I want to turn this around. And they set up an accountability thing, and Cooper was flushing pills down the toilet for him. And like, he's like, we're going to get through this together. And they're texting back and forth. And I mean, we're talking like right before this happened is Cooper's getting rid of pills and saying, okay, like I'm, you know, but I don't know if he realized how much physically he was dependent by that point. I think he needed a medical intervention to fully get off them.
I think so too.
And I don't think he knew that at that time. So there is a back and forth happening, you know,
it's a struggle.
And there's, you know, just a lot going on in his life at that point. And I think people have a very minute perception based on what was said publicly or whatever, that they don't see the full picture. And I'm hoping we have a chance to set some of that record straight.
You know, we all look at these things too through our own lens, okay?
Yeah.
And when I talk about our lens, I talk the lens of life experience. You're almost 40 or 40.
I'll be turning 40, yeah.
So you have a almost 40-year lens.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a 68 plus year lens
You don't
life
look
experience.
68. It's
but,
crazy.
see, but that's my life. That's my lens.
Yeah.
He had a 19, almost 20-year-old lens, which isn't a very long life experience, truly.
I forget that because he's an old soul, and that's one thing a lot of people agree on. He was very inquisitive, and he was really wise beyond his years in a lot of way. And I forget.
He's only 19.
He's like a year out of high school, man.
He's just a
like,
kid. You're out of high
young.
school, COVID, lockdowns, all that. I know that
so tragic, man.
Our audiences will want to know, me too, where you're at exactly with the film today.
Yeah.
What's the process of it, and like, what are the next steps and what you think that need to be taken, will be taken, and then where we get to premiere, because I know you are you're such an artist that you want to get it right. So there's a lot of, I call it canoodling that gets done, which, you know, I mean, when it's ready, you know. But what are the next? Where are we? What are the next steps, Brad? And that
absolutely
that so we can understand where it is and where it's going to come out.
One, the difference between making a feature-length documentary and making like content is, back in my commercial days, like, you have a deadline, you have a budget, you have a deadline. So if you're doing a 30 or a 60-second commercial, or even like a mini doc kind of piece for a brand, we know it has to be out by this date, and here's the budget we can work within, and that's when I was at a company. So by that date, whatever's ready is airing. The difference with the film is you have one chance to really do this. Once you put it out and people can rent it, buy it, it goes on a streaming service, like that is it. And as a director, what you don't want is something to go out and then you watch it and you're like, I missed the buck there, or I didn't pace it correctly there, or that. The flow is slightly off, but I put it out before it was ready. So we'll go back to, I meet you guys, we film almost a year to the day. I saw in the behind the scenes photo of the first time I interviewed you. It was almost a year to the day we decided to make this its own thing. So what you're doing on a piece like this is you're figuring out, I put them in 3 categories. When I start interviewing people, there's your A group. This is people that are central to the film. So for me, that's you, that's Treva, that's Parker, where you're going to be throughout the film because you're Cooper's sister. So Parker's going to be throughout the film because she knew him his whole life. I would also put Jaden in that category. Jaden spans a great deal of the film. Then you have your B. It's a layer out where you're still really important, and maybe you're in like half the film, like a Sab, Emma, Anna, Jordan, people that are a big part of his life, but like they're not in the part where we're talking about Laguna Beach because they weren't there, right?
Right.
And then you have an outer layer from that. That's your subject experts, like a Bill Bodner, to talk about fentanyl awareness stuff. Or maybe it's someone that you need to corroborate an event, but they're kind of only in that part of the film.
Understand.
They're there so you can build out like a story, but it's like, okay, you kind of live in this part of the film. So what you're trying to identify, and you'll probably remember as we sat here, and it's like, okay, who's open, who's available, who's willing to be a part of it. And Jaden was one of the first people that he was like, I really want to make sure that Cooper's story is done really well, and I want to help out. Can we meet? We went up, we met with him and Shannon. We had a really great 2-hour meeting. And then we started filming. We started going through interviews, and that grows. So then what happens is now I'm writing, before I even get to the treatment, I do a proposal, and that's like, okay, before I even get into this film, if you try and do too many things, it gets lost in the mix. So it's like, okay, what are the main things we're trying to accomplish by telling Cooper's story? And I think you have a copy of it, and the Film Collaborative, who's helping mitigate some of the budget, they have a copy that I had to do for them, but I have a 10-page film proposal that breaks down, going into the film, before I've even shot a majority of it, what I think the film will be about, what the synopsis is about, what assets I have access to tell the story, what themes we're playing with, what we want to drive home, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just to help me wrap my head around what am I trying to do? Because if you just roll cameras this and you just start talking to people, you're going to end up having to go back and, hey, can we do a second interview? Can we do a third interview? Because the first one, I didn't know what I was trying to ask you about, and it was aimless. But when you're dealing with people, like some of the people in this film, they're very busy.
Well, you're creating your roadmap and
Yes.
your guide. Yeah, and I understand that evolves as well.
Yeah.
Based on what you extract.
Exactly. So then, once you start doing your core interviews like that A level, and you start to find stories that, okay, this matters. Wilderness and boarding school matters because everyone's talking about that element of his life. Then you start to identify, okay, these are things that need to go in the film, and how do we want to portray them? Sometimes you find things like the Sway House, where you're like, let's go to the neighborhood the Sway House is in and film out front and tell stories there so that we can show people, this is what it looks like. Yeah. This is where it
LA,
happened.
this is Sunset.
So you start going into the process, and then by the time you shoot, I think at this point we've shot 25, 26 interviews. Some of those interviews are 2 hours, some are 45 minutes. So we'll say you have 30 hours of footage.
Man,
then you're like, okay, I've got 30 hours plus location shoots, plus B-roll and drone stuff we're doing.
How do you get it all down?
Then you're like, I got to go through all that and categorize. Okay, this is every time his friends talk about getting into casual using. So that all gets grouped together on a timeline where, okay, this is about getting into smoking pot because that's where it started. And then this is about wilderness. And this is about his love for skateboarding. And this is about growing up in the Noriega house. And then you start to kind of organize and label things. And you're trying to smash 30, 35 hours into an 80-minute film.
Wow.
So as you're doing that, I start writing the treatment, which is putting it, and I usually do a 4-act structure, which is really just dividing act 2 into 2. So usually your act 1 is I need an opening kind of, we'll call it a hook that's going to let people know what the film they're about to watch is. So you open a film and you want people to know this is the film I'm going to watch. Then your act 1, you want it to be world building. Like if we're going to start in Laguna Beach, then I got to talk about, I grew up next to Laguna Beach. I know what Laguna is like. I grew up going to Taco Loco after punk shows. If you've never been here, you have no idea what this place is like. So I've got to tell you what it's like, and I've got to show you what it's like. And then you start going out at sunrise. And since lighting's only good for an hour, you're going out 5, 6, 7 sunrises just to get Laguna Beach sunrise footage to show this is what the cliffs look like. And, you know, people saw in the teaser, the wave breaking.
Yeah.
That's just stuff where we happen to be there at sunrise. And I'm like, oh, look at how the waves are breaking and backspraying with the offshore wind. Like, I'm going to shoot that.
You got a good day.
So act 1 is like world building. I want to introduce you to the people you're going to see throughout the film. So you and Treva and Parker. And it's like, and Cooper. Cooper's the central character of the film. So we need to give you a bit of an overview of who he is. His fans know, but if you had no idea and you turn on Netflix and you watch this film, if I just started talking about his life, but you had no idea who he is, maybe 10 minutes in, you're like, nah, I'm going to watch something else.
Right.
So I need to give you an overview of what you're going to watch. And then it kind of goes into, as it progresses, our act 2 is split in 2, but generally act 2 is like when you establish, here's the nature of the problem we're going to start talking about. The first nature would be when he starts to casually use and all of a sudden at 14 he ends up in the hospital. That's a life-defining moment. Is now it's like, okay, we're not just kind of partying, like there's stuff going on. Yes, we knew he was sensitive. Yes, we knew he might have been experimenting a bit, but now he's in the hospital and we need to intercede or where does this path take him?
Right.
So then as we go, then he comes back to Laguna after wilderness. He goes on this awesome mission trip. He gets baptized in the Dominican Republic and, you know, everything kind of stabilizes as so it would seem. And then he moves to LA and then we start to hit some trials again. Yeah. And that's when Tell Me About Tomorrow's written after an overdose and there's some things that happen, but then he stabilizes. And it seems like, okay, we have this thing under wraps and that leads up to the events that lead to his passing. And then act 3 is mainly channeled in what do we do now?
Yeah.
What is Cooper's legacy? How is Cooper still helping people? And that's where we talk about his court case. That's where we talk about the start of the foundation and everything you're doing. So it's easy on paper to map this out in a treatment and be like, here's kind of the flow of the film, but keep in mind, this isn't a narrative film where I have a script and I wrote dialogue and I have actors that I'm scouting, read me the dialogue, deliver it correctly. These are everyday life with real people having real emotions in real time. So I'm not writing it. I have an idea of how I want the film to flow, but then we're filming and moments happen. When Jaden comes over and shows you that music video and you 3 hug and are crying, that was not a planned moment. I happened to be here.
I remember that.
And it was so like, I don't know if it conveys through the film, but it was so emotional watching. Because it was like, I knew Jaden was coming over after a podcast with Ryan Scheckler. He was going to pop by the house.
That's right.
And I was like, we'll film in the photo room. I'll get some thoughts. And it was the first time we were filming together. And they come in and he's just talking and I'm filming it. And all of a sudden Shannon's like, hey, let's load up the music video. And it's like, oh, what's happening? And then they show it to you guys. And it's like, you can't contrive or force moments like that. They just happen. And then you're figuring out, okay, where does it go in the film? Like, how do I show people why this matters and in the flow of the film? So kind of where we're at right now is for months and months and months, I've been editing this film, going through interviews over and over, putting sequences together. We're putting out teasers, and now we're putting out some breadcrumbs, I'm calling them, or like they're scene shorts. It's an actual scene from the film, uncut, usually a partial scene where I'm taking a scene and I'm taking a section of it, just to show people this is what it looks like, this is what it feels like.
Give them tastes of it.
And the teaser had some cinematic elements, and there's drone footage or whatever, but some of these scene shorts, I wanted to be not that.
Right.
Jaden coming over, talking in the photo room, or showing you guys the music video, there's no camera tricks, there's no like crazy cinematography. All it is like real life unfolding, and the emotion is what speaks. So I wanted to put out some stuff like that so people get the balance.
And it's working.
So sometimes as I'm putting things together, there actually 2 days ago, there was a scene of you talking that was 5 minutes in the film. And 2 days ago, it got moved to like 33 minutes in the film because I realized as I kept watching through and adding, I'm like, this doesn't really go, like, I feel like this is too early. And I moved it. And there's another scene that I had put together and it didn't really stick where I had put it. So then it gets pushed back. And all of a sudden that found a place. So it's like the film is not far off, but it's like this working process of finessing. And even what I would say the opening 10 minutes that I've had cut for months has been revised, I think, a dozen times of minor tweaks.
I just don't know. I mean, you have tremendous patience and vision to do this, because you just mentioned it's like 30 plus hours, of just interviews to get, like, maybe you've got 40, 50, 60 hours of film down to, like 80, 90 minutes to tell a story.
Yeah.
Like you said, to tell a story from other people telling their bits and pieces of their stories, right? Getting the clips and being able to like create a quilt, that has a story. To me, it's amazing, because the first thing you put out was the official trailer #1. And if I send that to people that haven't seen it, like I sent it to Rosa, the DEA liaison that was with us last week for the podcast with Bill. And she wrote that book that she gave me the copy of the book that she wrote. And so I sent her that, and she goes, "Oh my God." She goes, "I just started bawling. That's was so emotional." And that trailer, there's two things about it that you did. The music with the opening scene, about looking through the cave thing. Yeah. And then there's the wave, okay? And then it immediately starts talking, and then there's Bill Bodner, and then it goes into Laguna Girls, and then there's Lydia talks about high school, and that Cooper and I, we always planned we were going to go to LA, and that
Tell Me About Tomorrow starts.
And then it's yes, but then you look at Jaden's song, how his song starts out, Tell Me About Tomorrow, which was written about Cooper, but starts out with the acoustic, and then it builds to a crescendo and goes full delivery. The film trailer is starting out like the beginning of the song, and it goes into the next, builds up to a turn, which is talking about moving to LA. The song begins. It takes you to crescendo, and then it leaves you with like, wow, this is amazing. Everybody looks at that trailer, and it's not just the cinematography, but it's the music. There's the music that you've brought in,
all of
and
the
there's
elements.
Jaden's music that just seems like it's so written for each other. Like his story in music, your story, Cooper's story. It is. When I saw that trailer, I was like, man, this film is going to be powerful.
I remember that moment and us talking on the phone too. And okay, so I know there's probably some fans that'll watch this that I see like the edits that come out, and like
they take pieces of what you put out and
Well,
do
and
their
that's
own.
fine, but
Yeah.
even the stuff they do, and I just want to encourage people out there. There is nothing special about me other than what God is doing through me. I'm not the most gifted director or the best, like I was a director of photography, just focused on cinematography in the commercial world. I don't think I was the best at that. The only thing that I think makes Brad Alexander as a director special is my heart and giving people a place to be vulnerable. And I've heard a lot in interviews that people are like, you made this like way easier than I thought, or I didn't think we would go where we went, but I felt comfortable with you. The elements coming together is A, to give Hunter his flowers. The footage he has of Jaden and Cooper and just like all of these events that he just willingly gave over out of his love for you, Treva, and Cooper, it would not be the same film if he didn't do that, and he did not have to do that. So it's like having that footage. And you know, some of my friends that don't know these people missed it, but I'm sure the fans gathered that in that teaser, when it cuts to Jaden talking on stage, it's because that's the first time he played Tell Me About Tomorrow to an audience. And you and Treva and Cooper were standing there during that dialogue. And I know a lot of people did catch that I threw that in there for that reason. We're playing that song, and here's Jaden talking about why he wrote that song. But what he's saying about Cooper, he'll always be here, and then it goes to everyone in their interviews kind of breaking down. I felt like that was like the, if not for fentanyl, he would still be here.
Right.
And that's the emotion of it. The other thing is Jaden giving us music to use and his label allowing it. And not only that, but that teaser, I'm chopping up his song.
I know.
So anyone who knows the song knows I'm cutting pieces out.
It's perfect.
But can you imagine as an artist, someone's like manipulating and cutting up your song, and he's just like, do you? He's always been very kind through this process. In the same, I'm chopping up a bit the title sequence to the film, which you haven't seen yet. But after our opening sequence, it cuts to Even in the Dark, and that's our opening credits with different footage and shots. And that song, you showed me Even in the Dark the first time I came here and interviewed you guys. And you're like, oh, he just put this out. I didn't know who Jaden was. And you're like, he put out this 2-song EP. It was very emotional. And I went home and I listened to Even in the Dark, and I broke down crying thinking about my friend Andrew, who died of an overdose. His was an Oxycontin Xanax concoction, and he suffocated in his sleep. And it's been 20 years, and I still grieve him because I loved him so much. He was kind of a Cooper. He was just loved God, and he was a great guy, and everyone loved him. And I always felt like it should have been one of us. Like, I feel like in a lot of ways I was kind of a dirtbag. Like, Andrew was amazing. Like, why did I get to survive and he didn't? But anyway, as I was listening to that song, so that song became special. So that became the title sequence. And I knew before we had a title sequence, I told Shannon and Jaden I wanted to use that. And there's all these elements that come together. The person who's composing our film, Stephen Keach, he hasn't finished completing the custom score because our film will have a custom score. But the songs in that teaser are songs Steven provided to me. So those are him writing.
It is perfect.
And he's the vocalist of Haste the Day, which is a Christian hardcore band that I grew up listening to.
Dude,
and it's like, when we reconnected, it's like, you sing for Haste the Day. It's the connections and the elements that come together are what makes these things special. And for me, I've learned, if you try and make yourself somebody, if I'm like, I want to be known as a director and people to know my name or whatever, that's a really tiring and really selfish pursuit. But if I say,
it's very human.
I'm just going to allow myself to go where God leads me and connect with the people that God lines up, and I'm going to get out of the way and just let the story speak, then it's amazing how little ideas all of a sudden come into your head and you're like, oh, I should do it like this. Or like, look at that moment, or we should film this like this. And then also the happy accidents were like, Curtis, who you're familiar with, who's my assistant drone operator at this point. Mm-hmm. When we showed up at that beach and it's dark out and the tunnel's flooded, we're like, should we even go? It's the dead of winter, the water's freezing cold, and he's like, I'm down if you are, and I'm used to people like not wanting to get their hands dirty, you know? So we literally rolled up our pants and walked through shin deep water through that tunnel. Our feet are going numb. We shot on the beach, all this footage. And when we're leaving, we're looking at the tunnel and I'm like, it's such a rad shot. And he's like, do you want me to fly the drone through it? And I was like, are you comfortable doing that? Because some people would be like, what if I crash into a wall? And he's like, let's just do it. And then he shot it 3 different ways. And that shot for the teaser and in the opening of the film,
It's awesome.
is like a shot that I'll always remember. That was just Curtis, like, let's do it, man. And it's like this amazing shot, you know?
So, I mean, I don't know the way to correctly express it because I don't want to diminish it, but it's so professional. It's like, man, I mean, I don't see anything better out of Hollywood. This is like...
No, I think Hollywood's kind of lost right now.
This is like, I mean, this is such quality and such impact. Everyone that sees it has an emotional experience. For our audiences that may not know, you can find the official trailer, first and second teaser on the Coop's Advice YouTube channel on YouTube, and then also the breadcrumbs that have come out.
Yeah.
It's just the recent one. I just got it uploaded yesterday.
Okay,
and
awesome.
It's already like blowing up. I'm
Yeah.
starting to see it
That's
on social
amazing.
media because we have a substantial following on the YouTube channel.
That's cool.
And so
that scene means a lot.
And everybody's asking like when is it going to be out? Like,
Yeah,
what are your
so
plans for the film?
Let's address that. Because the film, I don't think is far off. But even once I have a draft, I've said from the very beginning.
Is that like a rough draft? I mean, when you say you have a draft,
I don't know
is
if
it
I
like
would
a
call
rough
it
draft
rough.
where there's meaning like there's still some things that got to be tweaked, or it's pretty much done, but if you look at it, you might catch something and make a tweak?
Yes, that's more accurate.
So let's say it's about 99% done.
It'll probably, the version you see first will probably still have some temp tracking of score that will get switched out, which is how I pace the film, and then Steven replaces it with custom. There may be some B-roll, meaning supporting clip placeholders, where I film something and I put it there, but I intend to go, we've been doing some pickup footage. We shot
like
last
recently.
week.
Yeah, right.
Stuff like that. But because I've been vetting it as we go and I've gone over things dozens of times, the first draft you'll see, from my perspective, will be like 90% there. However, I've said since the beginning, the most important thing to me is that you and Treva feel like Cooper's story is accurate and that it does what it needs to do. So you guys will see it first and you'll be able to weigh in on if there's anything that needs to be adjusted. The second will go out to like Jaden, Sab, Emma, Hunter, all of the people that have been involved in the film, provided to the film, etc., to see how they're represented, how the stories they're telling are represented. And we'll be able to have some dialogue there. And then generally after that, what I would like to do is, instead of doing things through links, I would like to do a couple test screenings in a theater to show it to an audience, and then get feedback after. And that, because it's been through some waves, will be like pretty tight. It may not get changed at all after that. But if we,
But if you find
we'll work that out.
But if you find somebody misses something that's supposed to be an impact, or
exactly,
or maybe like just something. I understand what you're saying.
Something about watching it with an audience too. Like, I watched it a bunch, and then I showed the opening 25 minutes to my pastor and a couple friends at church in the sanctuary, just like 4 of us. And they were like, wow, the cinematography and this and that. But there was a couple questions where they're like, oh, I'm sure you explain this later. And I'm like, no, that needs to be addressed. So it's like, if you're asking that question by this point in the film, then I didn't make it clear enough. So then I go back and I go through it and I'm like, okay, how can I make sure this is known earlier? Things like that. Now, my director cap that wants to make the best film, to make a statement, to make sure things are portrayed right, that's all that. Then my producer hat is, if you want to make an impact, you need the most amount of people to see it possible. That's not about my ego. That's not about anything other than, if we want to change the status quo of how people talk about drug addiction, mental health, and fentanyl, and tell Cooper's story in the most truthful way we can, we need people to watch it. And for people to watch it, the most tried and true method is we need to get into some high caliber quality film festivals. Audiences see it, people want to help you distribute it, get it out there. Most of the festivals that we want to go after, that we're very confident that we can breach into, they have rules.
Yeah.
South by Southwest has been one that's been on our radar for a while. Like, we would like to submit to Sundance as well. Tribeca. Some of these festivals we have connections at. Santa Barbara would be great. Laguna Beach. We want to show it hometown.
Newport.
Yeah. Newport is a little more lenient than, say, South by Southwest, right? And South by Southwest is a little more lenient than Sundance, right? Sundance is debatably one of the biggest in the world.
Yeah.
Toronto is another one that people brought up. Hey, I know some people over there, we can put in a word.
Right.
Well, to get into a Sundance or Toronto, you have a deadline to submit your application. That's your film poster, synopsis, my director statement, the teaser, and the actual film, so they can review the press kit. That's usually months before they'll let you know if you're in the festival, which is usually a month or two before the actual festival. But we'll say Sundance, you got to be a world premiere. If we've showed this publicly in any way and they find out, you're disqualified.
Wow.
South by Southwest will prioritize, they like a world premiere, but they'll let you off with the Texas premiere. So as long as we haven't shown it in Texas, you won't be disqualified.
Why Texas?
Think in terms, because it's in Austin, Texas.
Oh, got it. Okay, got it.
Think in terms of, if I'm a film festival and I have sponsor money coming in, and then we're trying to sell tickets and we're using these films to sell tickets, but that film is now on YouTube or available to rent or whatever else.
Exclusivity.
Well, then who's going to come see it in the festival, right? Some people, but not a lot.
Yeah.
So our goal right now is to get a high quality draft of this film in the next month or two, to have you and Treva get eyes on it, work out any feedback we have, the rest of the group to get eyes on it, do a couple friends, family kind of test screenings. And I know you have some ideas about maybe how to include some other people. After we clear that, it'll go up to festival applications. And then for a number of months, we'll be waiting to see what kind of festival run we get to have. And I'm sure that'll be amazing. And the best part of that is it's not going to be a California thing.
No, it's all over.
I mean, there's a Montana festival, Big Sky. I would love to play a documentary focused one. There's one in North Carolina that would be awesome. New York, there's some in Florida. All over the country, there's great festivals. So our goal is to get into some of the bigger, but also to do some mid-level, maybe some smaller ones too, so that we can go around the country. And there's another reason for that, not just to get eyes on it. My favorite part of making a film is when you get to show the film, and then you usually at these festivals, they give you 20, 30 minutes after to talk about why you made the film. And I've been telling you from the beginning, that's me bringing you up in front of an audience and letting you talk about what Coop's Advice is doing, fentanyl awareness, what kind of call to action, how you can make a difference, supporting people like End Overdose. That's our chance to engage audiences all over the country that maybe have never heard of Cooper or maybe have never heard of this film, but they see us at a festival and they're in the audience and they watch it and they're impacted. And then you get to go up there and say, here's how you can help. Here's how you can be a part of the cause. Even if it's sharing a teaser or a podcast episode, or you donate to one of these nonprofits, or you buy merchandise, which helps put people through treatment, helps keep the podcast going, helps pay the person who's moderating the Discord. It's all of these things together, we're all same team. Yeah. So the festival run is really important. The screenings we're going to do, we'll probably, after we premiere, we'll probably do some other screenings too, maybe in LA, maybe wherever, where we host it in a theater and we get to control it and do a Q&A. And, maybe we have some of the friends, I haven't talked to them, I'm just spitballing this, but it's maybe we have some of the friends there to do a Q&A with you.
Well, I was thinking that would be something that we would probably do up in LA. Jane had mentioned there's a couple places that we could get on Sunset. And then with his management group behind him, they're used to doing big promotions like this. And similar like we would do for concerts. small concerts, large concerts.
It's all
Yeah,
so
it's all
similar.
the same.
Yeah.
And then having, the Emmas, the Sabs, the Hunters part of
Yeah.
it, to be up there, to answer questions to, because a lot of the people that would be in attendance are going to be a lot of this peer group.
And I mean,
well, that's where
Hunter
that's where we want the
providing
message.
that footage, and Jaden has filmed with me 7 or 8 times. I mean, they're putting in a lot of work on this film too.
I know.
So I would love it if they get to be a part of the rollout as well, But
so when do you anticipate at the most conservative date would be where the public would start first seeing something? Like spring?
outside of like an actual screening.
I'd say a screening. Summer?
And
Like
yeah, it's
25?
probably closer to summer.
How about Treva and I?
You guys are probably like 4 to 6 weeks out.
Okay.
You're like,
Got to get past the new year.
I only have one chance to make a first impression.
I know.
And what I learned from the threshing floor, and Live to Tell, but the threshing floor, is you show people a draft. That film started out at 1 hour and 50 minutes, and it ended up at 95.
Yeah.
You show people things, and then by the time you show them an updated draft or a third draft, they can't remember,
Right.
hey, is that scene still in the film, or did you
Right.
cut that one, or oh, did you change this? And it's like, it's really hard to remember. So my goal on this, the reason I've gone through it so many times, is by the time you guys see it, I know it's going to be emotional.
It'll be refined.
And I want you guys to be able to watch it more than once, because the first time I think will be so emotional that you may have to watch it a second time to make sure, do we like how that story is being told? Do we like, does this feel accurate to the experience? The first time, if things provoke emotions, it may be hard to catch certain things.
Understand.
So I want to give you guys a vetted out draft you can chew on.
How will we view this?
I had always envisioned it'd be really cool if I got to come over and us watch it on your TV,
I was
the
gonna
three
say,
of us, or maybe
otherwise-
even have Parker here too, Parker and Alex.
Because typically what people watch stuff on is a computer, right? A laptop or...
You miss some of it that way
I'd
too.
rather it be on a format
Yeah.
how we would watch a film, like on a TV.
I
Because
would-
it's more impactful than, us looking
Yeah.
at a computer or laptop.
Maybe we even call in a favor at one of the local churches and show it on a big screen with an audio system. But
there might be the
You know?
opportunity that we can borrow the Rivian Theater for that time
that
period.
would be awesome.
Because we have enough people that are associated with that. I could ask and say,
Yeah.
can we rent it for just an afternoon so we can just take a pre-test run
I'm
of this?
sure they would let us do
Because
that
we eventually
too.
would want to,
Or the Lido, or
and have a deal there for
Yeah.
a couple days when it's ready to test run and
That'd be
also
awesome.
have the town where you grew up and see it.
So I know it's discouraging, even as people have heard us talking about this, when it's like they've been waiting for it to come out any day now, and it's like, you're talking about summer. What I'm hoping that people can get behind and support is, we didn't want to rush out a film that would be forgotten about in a year. We're trying to vet out, polish, make a film that will stand up. So 10 years from now, if people watch it, I hope they'll get something out of it. And that just, it takes time, and it takes going over and going over. And even as I'm editing, as you just saw, I'll edit and I'll go through. And then the supporting content, I'm like, this doesn't put the viewer in the headspace the way I want. So we need to go do pickup footage. And that's where I called, and it took like maybe a couple weeks, and we scheduled. I wanted to film this toll road sequence where when you got the phone call that Cooper was in the hospital when he was 14, you were driving down the toll road. And as you tell that story, I feel it, but how do I show people that?
Right.
Well, I want them to see you driving, and I want them to see shots out the window and signs going by and the drone shot hovering down the toll road. And that wasn't in there. So as I edited that, I'm like, we got to go film that.
Right.
And now Curtis is so in tune with me, because he's been able to shoot everything, that all I had to do is, before, I'm like, here's the sequence we're conveying, here's what I want it to be. And you saw after we shot, we pulled over the car, he popped out. I don't even have to micromanage anymore. He shot the footage, like 3 different variations, and that night he sent me the footage, and it was like, this is exactly the sequence in my head. I put it together in the film, re-exported it on the draft so I can watch through it. And it's like, there's a lot of that happening right now too, where, you know, if I need to do a pickup shot, there's a scene that I really want to film with Treva and Stacey King.
Right.
And schedules just haven't allowed it. And I really want that scene. So it's been some weeks of trying to schedule that. Yeah. And you have to be sensitive. Like, you guys aren't getting paid to work on this film. You're doing it because you believe in the cause. So that means if you're working and busy for a couple weeks, I need to respect that.
I also know, Brad, I've said this from the very beginning. I don't think you have ever heard us apply any pressure or rush to get anything out. This has been in God's hands. How we got together.
Yeah.
I mean, look, Cooper's whole story is truly, God had a plan for Cooper to go through this, to do this, to create these things, to lead this, to leave work for us to do, for these things to happen, that this is one part of it, of many things. Yeah. And it'll happen in its own right time, which is God's time. And I'm not worried about that. It will be
which has been
as
really
He wants
cool.
it. And it will tell, God will tell the story that He wants to be told of Cooper through everybody's collective hands. And that's it. And you can't, I've learned this. I don't want to get in the way of what God has for me to do. And I pray this multiple times a day, usually when I'm going to sleep, usually every night when I don't sleep, and usually every morning when I wake up a number of times because I can't sleep. And I just say, just help me and teach me to stay out of your way and to listen to what you want me to do. That's it.
Yeah.
And, you know, life is a lot easier that way. And trust me, we've had some very, very difficult and challenging times, not just with Cooper. I mean, really, at the brink of disaster challenges. And yet God answers prayers. I've watched Him answer Treva's prayers. I've seen Him answer mine. And it's just, you know, it's kind of like makes me laugh at the point, like, would this have not taken so long if I just would have, like, just not stressed? But I also know that, no, it happened in its right time because it's teaching me something. So I needed to go through it. And I'm asking to make sure, I want to learn what this is, because I don't want to have to go back and do it again. Yeah. So this film will be, if it's anything like the trailer, which I know it's going to be like the trailer on steroids, I just know it will be great. I know in my heart.
I appreciate everything. And you have been really, really cool about, like, hey, in God's timing. And you know, that's not how everyone is. A lot of people, it would be like, what are those festival deadlines? And are we getting in this year? I want to kind of vocalize something, but then I had a question for you. And by the way, just as a side note, we'd always envisioned this ending with the sentencing of Cooper's dealers. And that's another reason that we've kind of been holding off, is I always envisioned the last scene of the film being whatever the outcome is with the people who are either going to take a plea deal or stand trial. And that's continued to get pushed out, and it's become like, okay, well, maybe it wasn't meant to be. It's a
source of great anxiety for Treva and I.
Yeah. I wanted to say, I've seen God's hand all over this, from that I believe it was a detective who said there's something fishy about this. So instead of classifying Cooper's death an overdose and moving on in life, they're like, no, there's something here. To Reed connecting us like a week after I met Reed could have just not happened. I've always said, I think I'm supposed to do this film. And it's weird to me because I'm sure there's so many other people you guys could have worked with if you wanted to do Cooper's story. I kind of just waltzed in like organically.
We never had any thought of doing a film. we never thought of ever having any of doing a podcast.
Yeah.
I don't even remember how I got started on wanting to do a podcast. But I mean, I truly don't remember. But we never had any of this, and it just evolved. But I do remember getting the word from someone, from Cooper, that said that there are things for you to do, and I have things for you to do. You'll know when it's the right time. There'll be some things that'll be for you to do, but not the right timing, and some things not to do. But you'll know when it's the right thing.
Oh,
and it goes so just and it's just all started opening up. And you were one of them. Podcast was one of them. Zed, you were one of them.
That's
Theo,
cool. That's cool.
All this stuff, man. The foundation, the merchandise, doing, you know, I mean, furthering the Discord. There's some stuff that's happening now where I was on this panel a few weeks ago that another platform hosted, and they had there was a lot of notables on it, and one of the questions I asked from some of the other people that were involved in platforms and really big national fentanyl platforms, I said, we're a little different, but here's where I'm going with this. Almost everybody out there has started a platform of making, you know, to combat fentanyl and fentanyl awareness and education because they've lost a loved one, and it's been like the parents or the survivors that have started this.
Right.
We're the only one that I know so far that started this. This thing got started by our son who passed away. He started this movement.
That's crazy to think about.
We didn't do this, you know. So he started the relationship with End Overdose to try to promote and support the awareness about naloxone and fentanyl. Yeah. He started the Discord platform so that kids could have a safe space to talk about addiction and mental health, which is the underlying cause, which still goes very strong today. And then less than a week after Cooper passed, in this room, his friends were sitting right over here, the kitchen area, right around here, and Alana said, we should start a foundation, and Cooper wanted to do merchandise for End Overdose. We should sell merchandise to fund a foundation to keep this going. And I'm like, you know, the bomb just went off. This was right after he passed away, like a day or two.
Yeah.
And by the next Thursday, the foundation was up and running. Formed, launched, website, boom, and nothing that we had done. And it's like, it started going, and they started designing merchandise, and they got a Shopify store. And I'm like, this wasn't anything that we've done, but it was a matter of, okay, I guess this is what we're supposed to do. And then other things, you know, are part of this journey.
Yeah.
And it's, so these people that are on this forum with, I said, is there something we can do to put a rope around all of our platforms and make it one strong voice? Can the government support that and fund it so we have, you know, this fentanyl coalition, so to speak?
Yeah.
And work together.
That's a great idea.
I mean, I know we're doing things, but work together. And so we're having discussions about that. One of the persons has already spoken with the government, and there's a couple notable former newscasters, famous, that are well known out there that want to help and support. I'm like, all right, let's get a rope around this thing and like just, you know, really make it national and make it national, unified.
I could see that.
So, whatever. I mean, it's just like where things are going.
Dude, Alana's a badass too. We haven't mentioned her until now, but I'm like, she locked down a studio multiple times for me to shoot interviews, which saved budget, because the studio, just to get a day to shoot a couple interviews or sometimes an interview, you're spending $600-700 sometimes. So it's like,
or more. Yeah.
Yeah. She locked down that studio for us to use multiple times. She's been so helpful.
Yeah, she's been
She's
helpful
awesome.
by encouraging all of the influencers, the friends and influencers,
Yeah.
to promote and repost. And look, I mean, our photo shoots are all these influencers,
Yeah.
that have millions of followers promoting the merch. They wear it all the time.
Yeah.
We did the one up at Jaden's with Quentin. That was kind of an interesting experience, right? But I mean, it was a good pod. It was a really good podcast, and you could tell that was the first time at that filming, right when you were getting set up, that Jaden and Quentin saw the official trailer, the first one, and then
no
they
way.
both lost it in the kitchen. It was me, both of them, and Shannon. And Shannon had seen it, and I was just holding the phone, and they were watching it. Man, they lost it. They were amazed at how good this was, and
It's really moving, man.
But it's
yeah.
this film. I just know in my heart it's going to be something that's going to have a lot of impact, a lot of healing for a lot of people, and a lot of help.
So the last thing I was going to say, and then I really want your thoughts on this, is whenever I get caught up in, I expected to shoot this and have it out 6 months, and now we're a year out. It's close to done, but you're like, okay, but I'm not going to get into the logistics, just the bare bones. You guys know about it and I know about it, but I was caught up in what I would call a writer's block. Even though it's a documentary, figuring out how to unfold things, sometimes you hit a fork in the road and it's like, do I go this way? Do I go that way? Do I go back into backstory? Do I tell the story this way? Do I incorporate this? And for 2 months, nothing I was trying was working. Some of the sequences stayed, but it was not jiving.
Yeah, it didn't
and I was getting so frustrated. And I told you and Treva, I've only had, in my 16 years as a Christian, I've had maybe 3 or 4 what I felt like were spiritual dreams, where there's something different about what just happened.
Like God moments.
And I had a dream that I met Cooper, and I was in a house and everything was chaotic and there was all this stuff going on, and I felt like I was supposed to go outside, and I walked outside and people were running in between us, but I saw Cooper sitting in a lounge chair. And I waited for things to die down, and I walked over, and it was in the dream, and it felt so real. It's we knew who each other were. He knew who I was, even though we've never met. And we had a conversation that I kind of briefly told you guys about, and that's just for me. But my takeaway from the conversation is that the headspace I was in was not good, and that I need to let it go. Trying to figure out why this happened, trying to figure out the woulda, coulda, shouldas, and what could have been different, and just focusing on how to tell the story and letting God use it and all of the things that have come out of it, and to stop worrying about everything else. What festivals you're going to get into, what accolades, or, this and that and the other thing. And the last thing I said to him in the dream was, I'm really sorry this happened to you. And I broke down and I woke up gasping for air because I was crying so hard.
Oh my God.
And it was like a download from God that I immediately knew what the interpretation of the dream is as soon as I opened my eyes. And I was so emotional. And there was something so real about it. And when that freed me up, I got back in the edit bay and the film started pushing forward again. So for me, it's this is going in whatever time it's meant to go in. And as much as I would love to force it, sometimes you end up for 2 months, nothing is working. And all of a sudden you have a moment like that. And whatever that was, God allowing me to meet him or whatever spiritual capacity, I'm not going to try and wrap my head around it. There was something prolific and something very real about our conversation in that dream and the emotions that poured out of me. And I woke up ready to get back to work, and the film started progressing forward again. So whatever time this is meant to happen in, it's going to happen in.
100%.
I really believe that. And the thing I wanted to ask you is, now a year out and all the times we've been able to work together and whatnot, how has your experience been? I mean, this isn't just a story to you. This is like your son, and it's his legacy, and there's so much personal stuff, and we're talking about events from 19 years ago and 10 years ago, and I would just love to know like what the experience has been like for you working on the film, and if it's caused you to reflect on anything different or process anything.
That's a very good question. I didn't expect to be asked a question on a podcast that we're doing, but I will say this. The only part that is challenging for me, that really touches me, I mean, really hits the sensitive part, is the more I learn and about his last few days, because there was such a struggle going on inside of him. I've seen him struggle before. I've seen him struggle, and cry as a young boy and as an older boy. I've seen him when he was hurt, when people, like when his feelings were hurt. Okay?
Right.
And so it hurts me to try to imagine what he was going through. And I'll say this. I've never said this before, but he died alone. And I think of one of the worst things that a person can go through is to die alone and to be cold, dying alone. And I throw the cold in because I hate being cold. I can be warm. I can be in a desert. I can be anywhere. I don't like being cold, that shivering. When I get cold, like I'm cold today. When we're starting to film, I ask that the doors be closed. My feet get cold and my whole body gets cold. And I get this cold feeling. I don't like it. If I was hot and sweaty, it's not a big deal. But for him to die alone, that hurts me.
Yeah.
But I know that I'm told, I've never seen this, and I don't know if I'll ever see the film of him dying, that there is security footage that the DEA has seen, the prosecuting attorney has seen. But they have explained to us that when he sat down on the curb in the parking lot, he looked up, and Treva says he knew he was dying and he was seeing God, and then we're told he put his head down and he was gone. So that part hurts me because he died. And I don't get to hold him and touch him and talk to him physically. I don't get to see him, get married, have kids, all that, right?
Yeah.
But I know that I can't dwell with those pieces that bring me to a really, really dark place that I describe as a black hole in my mind, because it's a place that you don't return from, So I focus on the other things, the good memories and some of the struggles, but the things that are happening and that we're doing, and the feedback I get from kids around the world and parents were a lot of good, that I know that this is the right thing to be doing, and there's nothing but good that's going to come from that. And it is coming from that. It's there. So this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It's really what it is. It's what I'm supposed to be doing. And I asked you, I told you this when we first met, and not about the interview we did for your other film, but when we were going to embark on this project. And I said it, and I still feel this way, and it put a smile on my face and makes me want to laugh. It's like, you never met Cooper, and you didn't get to know him like everybody else, but you're going to get to know him, and he's going to change your life. And I'm going to ask you at some point in time, probably when we do the after podcast, how he changed your life.
Yeah.
Because I know it's already changing, but it's not over yet.
No. I think the hardest thing has been putting you guys through this. And it's like, I said that to Treva the last time I interviewed her. It's like, it always hurts to make you guys walk through.
You're not
that
making
again.
this. We're choosing to do this. And if we'd felt that this was something that we couldn't do or couldn't talk about,
right,
whatever, we wouldn't do it. Or we individually would say, I can't do that, or I can't talk about it. But everything we do is based on our choice. And I know behind that choice is that this is what Cooper would want us to do. This is what he left for us to do. And it is to help other people.
Yeah.
And has nothing to do with us. It's God's work, and it's Coop's work.
It's I think it's going to be impactful for that reason. And there's been a lot of moments, and those are changing, and we're not even done. But, there's quite a few times I was interviewing someone that, like, emotions came up in me. I remember I interviewed Landon and Kircher and Lucian the same day, and we were all in the room together. And Lucian, I think he was talking about, he's a friend from boarding school, and then a big fixture in your life after boarding school, he'd start coming up, and he was talking about how he has moments where he like forgets and then he remembers and breaks down, and like how it's forever and he can't even comprehend that. No. And he broke down and started crying in the whole room. Like, I started crying, and the guys, and we like turned off cameras, and everyone just stood there like wiping tears away on their shirts. And it was like one of those moments where something about Cooper just gets in there, and it's like, I have moments where I can keep it together, like right now, and I have moments where like, I don't know what it's like to lose a son, but I know what it's like to lose a friend that I felt like shouldn't have been lost. And that resonates over and over working on this. And I feel like there's something about Cooper that it feels very like tangible.
Well, there's a component to Cooper that we can't explain, but he had an impact on everybody that he met in a way that it stood out. Yeah. He had an individual, personal, to that person impact.
He's a character, man.
And he connected with so many people that one of the reasons he was so successful is because you can connect with somebody one-on-one and have moments with them. But he connected continually with the people that were in his life. But he was able to connect through the social media platform that people view over their phone or their tablet throughout the world. And they felt the connection. Yeah. And he had a gift. There was something. And I truly meant, like I say this in a very respectful way, that, and only as an example, Cooper was they had a Jesus effect. You've heard me say this, that Jesus was on the earth for 33 years. But for 3 years, he had an impact that changed the world forever and continues to do. He had 12 disciples, and they each had a role, and one of them started his church, and that church has proliferated through time, through wars and through time and through countries, and et cetera. Cooper was on the earth for 19 years, and basically for a couple years, he had an impact with the world. But like Jesus, he was greater impact after his death. The same with Cooper. That's the example. After his passing, he's had such an impact to save kids and to send a message that I think is still going to transcend the fentanyl epidemic. It's going to be really about what's the underlying cause, and that is it's mental health. And to get to a point of making different choices, we have to understand, why do I feel this way?
Mm-hmm.
And why do I want to make that choice when I have the ability and the power to make a different choice that will be healthier for me? And I can start unpacking whatever my causes are and eliminate that from being a stigma. It is not a stigma on the Discord platform with this Gen Z, Gen Alpha group.
Yeah.
But it still is a stigma in our society that if you break your leg, go to a doctor, it's like, man, I feel suicidal. Oh, stay away from that person.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you? Or I'm so depressed. I mean, it really is. You're ostracized. You're made fun of. You're looked at in a negative light, and that's, everybody has mental health issues like physical health issues. We have to look at things differently. Otherwise, we're going to keep segregating and putting people to the wayside and not really dealing with the core root. Those families that go through those issues with their family members, they get it. Okay? So if you love them, you'll do whatever you can. And this is what we need to do as a nation, as a community. Let's say with the community. We'll start there. That's what we're trying to do, is start at the community level.
Yeah.
And Cooper's taken this to a global level.
It's wild.
We're doing all we can to keep it going, and it's going on its own. But that's our goal. That's our mission. That's our purpose that he's left us, and that's why we're here.
Well, it's been a blessing to be a part of, and
me too. For us too.
To get to kind of walk into your life under not fun circumstances, but we've had good conversations at that table over there, and it's been a good thing. And you're right, beyond the fentanyl thing, I think there's a statement to be made about Cooper's ability to be suffering, but then be there for so many other people. And sometimes it's hard to realize he has like the two sides, because when you interview people and you always hear about his sense of humor and like how funny he was and like roasting everyone, but like you loved him for it. And then there's the deep feeler side, and then there's the darker elements too. He's a complex individual, but he was able to be there for so many people and fans, and hugging people and at Jaden shows, and responding to people and messages, and doing all these things at the same time as he's feeling tormented in his own mind. Usually when you get depressed, it can make you more selfish, because you're like, screw everyone. I'm hurting. Why should I care about anyone else? And that's not how he was. He
wasn't selfish.
And there's a statement to be made about that too, of like, I know everyone says check in on your friends, but I would almost say like, how do we be better friends to each other? Because you can check in and someone can be like, I'm good, but really they're not. But like, how can we show up more for the people in our life that we care for? And
I'll take it one step further. How can we be better friends and show up for ourselves?
Yeah. That's true too.
I'm presently in a 21-day gratitude challenge with a group that I really don't know anybody in the group, but the friend that invited me, I know, and I was amazed at how amazing she is in this space.
Cool.
And she invited me. And I said, I was at a point, 12 days ago, where I needed that, and I just said, I'm just gonna do it. Okay,
that's cool.
I'm just going to do it. And it's been so helpful every morning. I participate in it, and I post in this group chat, which is all around the world. And it's not a lot of people, but it's on a WhatsApp, that I decided I'm going to share my everyday gratitude that I'm posting with the Discord channel. because of how I'm there every day.
Yeah.
I say now, hey, this is what I'm doing. So like today, good morning. This is day 12 of the 21-day gratitude challenge.
Yeah.
And this is what I posted. It's just what, and I'm really open.
Cool,
I'm really open over here. Like, you get to see this side over here. I don't put it on social media. I put it on the Discord because that's what that group is talking about.
That's special.
I talk about, like, one of them was, today is a day that I just cannot find anything to be grateful for. And this is why. And
that's real.
I'll revisit it tomorrow. I mean, it's like, yeah, I'm human and I'm real like everybody else. Yeah. And that's the stuff that allows us to unpack and maybe deal with our own things in a healthy and positive way versus drinking or drugs or some other type of risk behavior, driving too fast, taking too much risk in things. So
the Discord gives people a place to talk and be vulnerable. And I would also say, like, that's what art is for, expressing emotion. So even if you don't draw or paint, write music, like write your thoughts. Like, some of the greatest writers of all time were just writing some of the stuff that was torturing or tormenting them, but like getting it out on paper. Or make films. If you don't have a budget to do a feature, then do a 5-minute short film, or do whatever you can do. Shoot with an iPhone. Like, there's something about expressing yourself and being able to put emotions out there that I found really helpful. And then find a community of people you can talk to. And
in this room, I play a lot of guitar, and I always have since I was
I've seen you play quite a few times.
Since I was about 9. It's an expression of emotion that lets the steam out of the teapot, because the teapot's like whistling. It's boiling over, so it allows me to do that just a little enough every few days, and then something resonates, and it allows me to communicate in that way.
And addiction's isolating. Yeah. So I try and go to the skate park once a week, just to, like, even if it's one other friend, but the bond and camaraderie of hanging out with the guys and trying some tricks, and it's like physical, but it's also like cheering each other on, and we clap when someone gets a trick. We're fist bumping. There's something about interaction that makes it better. Sorry to cut you off.
I was going to say, addiction is separating.
Yeah, it's a good way to put
all
it.
These things that are negative and unhealthy separate you from God. Mm-hmm. They isolate you from God. A step away or farther, which is really, in my belief, it's the devil, because to separate you forever from God. So once, again, this is all about empowerment for other people.
Yeah.
And I can't wait for the film. I can't wait for people to see this. I can't wait for it because I just know it's going to be great. And I appreciate you taking the time to come here today and talk about it. Our next time together, we will be doing a podcast and chatting about after the film's been out, to see the reaction and the effect. Yeah. Which I think will be amazing to reflect and look back from that point.
Absolutely. And just on like a closing note, I just want to thank every person out there that reshared that thing. When you see the views in like 24 hours and how much it's circulated and people saving it and resharing it, like, we see you and we appreciate you. And everyone who donated to Coop's Advice, supported Coop's Advice, has helped support this film. Like, we see you, we love you, we're so thankful. And the messages even I've gotten, there's like every so often someone will ask me like if, this person or that person's going to be in the film. Right. And it's hard. There's not even people that want to be in the film. Sometimes it wasn't the right time for them. And this is when we're making it and they chose that or couldn't participate. That's okay. Yeah. But most of the messages I get are people just like, I know this is going to wreck me, or I'm crying at this teaser, but thank you so much for sharing this. And I just want to publicly say, like, you don't know how much that lights my fire to continue. Sometimes it's hard to go through the interviews, or like, it's emotionally taxing content, but I believe in what we're doing. I love you and Treva. I'm like privileged to be able to do this with you. And then when the fans out there like support like that and send messages, it's like, that helps keep it going, you know?
Yeah.
So I know I speak for everyone when it's like, we appreciate you guys like a lot.
Thanks, man. Well, it's been a blessing meeting you and having you part of our life. Let's get this thing going, and then we'll do some short stuff that we'll put out as we got more progress. So there will be more trailers and teasers coming out, breadcrumbs. So
there's an official trailer that'll be a summary, what we use for festivals, and that'll be a concise. You saw a teaser of what the film was kind of becoming. There's going to be a trailer of what the film is. And we'll put out more scenes and, different stuff. So,
all right. Well, I think that's a wrap. This is it. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and love you more.